Welcome back to another episode of Jacket Sports Weekly here on WCTV. I'm Caleb Yager, and I'm joined beside none other than Austin Bechtold here today. The semester is wrapping up here pretty soon, but we got some sports to talk about today. First, let's talk about the red-hot softball team, 13-4 overall, 2-0 in conference play, and it was a while before the team played a doubleheader on Sunday against the Teal Tomcats. They won 6-0 and 10-1. Two impressive games, Austin.
Yeah, really, only allowing one run throughout the whole entire day. And Sydney Wilson, who's now second in Division III with a .41 ERA, was absolutely spectacular for the softball team, just continuing to power themselves to a good record, 13-4 right now overall and 2-0 in the PAC. Ella Brookman also had a fantastic pitching performance, giving up one run in the second game, and softball riding high as the best team of the spring.
Oh, absolutely. Game one, Brent Hunter had 3 hits in 4 at-bats, and Reagan Benschoter in game 2 had 3 hits as well. But they're going to be facing Chatham on Thursday in a doubleheader match, the 3rd and 4th games of PAC play for the softball team. Now we're heading over to baseball, a little bit of a different story. And on Saturday, doubleheader loss to Grove City. Game 1, 4-3, very close, tough loss for the Yellow Jackets. And then game 2 was just a completely different story, Austin.
Yeah, 21-3 in that second game, and Aiden Williams did not pitch very well in the first couple of innings, giving up 9 runs. And the team in that first game, though, tied it up in the bottom of the 6th inning before Grove City came right back and scored the winning run in the top of the 7th inning. Joe Sabalak pitched pretty well, and then Corey Fischer ended up coming in and getting the final out to relieve him, but a little bit too late on that pitching change as Sabalak gave up a single that ended up being the decisive hit in that game that really is what contributed to the loss.
And the first 4 batters of the in the lineup card for Game 1 were all freshmen for the Yellow Jackets, just to give an idea of how young this team is. But for the seniority on this team, Joe Sabalek with a solid afternoon. He did allow 10 hits, although he pitched 6.2 innings. He had 4 earned runs and 5 strikeouts. It was 4-3 game, 1-run game, very close overall. Grove City is a good team, mind you. And then the 21-3 loss started all the way from the beginning, 9-0 after the first 1.5 innings of play. And like you mentioned, Aiden Williams, 8 earned runs, a lot of question marks for the Yellow Jackets. Who's going to be stepping up on the mound? Is it going to be a freshman or is it going to be a senior? We'll see here in the future. But hosting Teal on Wednesday afternoon. Let's go over to the men's and women's outdoor track and field teams. Really just a great performance overall from both of these teams. A lot of personal records coming into play. The women's team getting it done on all fronts, Austin.
Yeah, we even saw Megan Berry, who will be on the show just a little bit later on here today, was 9th out of 52 participants in the javelin. We saw Michaela Rose have 2 top 8 performances, and also Rachel Pellegrino had a really good day for the 800-meter team for Waynesburg. And it was at Slippery Rock in the Invitational, and really this team had one of the best weather conditions throughout the whole entire season. And that obviously, I think, played a major part in this. And Aubrey Winger doing her thing as well, just continuing to excel outside of Waynesburg.
Yeah, although she did not compete at Slippery Rock, she competed in the Vert class meeting down in North Carolina. She posted the 3rd best Division III time in the 10,000 meters this season. Really impressive performance, and she's one of the top runners, and she's ranked in the top 25 right now in all of Division III. And for the men's team, a couple of solid performances as well. A lot of personal records. Kai Herbert, one of those, finishing 8th in the 110-meter hurdles, and a lot of potential for this men's team as well, Austin.
Yeah, there is, and just being able to see some of these impacts is something that you want to see as we start to get down to the stretch run. Still have a lot of time left in this season, but continue to build up some positive momentum, continue to go onto the right track. But especially from the women's team, we're seeing a lot of success. It just continues to be built up, and that's obviously what you want to see as they continue to chase the PAC crown.
The right track. I see what you did there, Austin. Big jokes, guy. I'm just kidding. You probably didn't intentionally do it. But anyway,
no
women's lacrosse 0-5 overall on the season so far. 0-2 in conference play. Playing against St. Vincent College tonight, and we just got word. Instead of being at 6 o'clock, it is postponed until 7:15 p.m. I'll actually be on the call for that one. They're coming off a 22-5 loss against Thiel College on Saturday. Men's tennis, though, doubleheader win against Thiel College and against Penn State Barron. A very, very long day for the Yellow Jackets. 9-0 against Thiel and 6-3 against Penn State Barron. The doubles teams and the single individuals really performing well for that team.
Yeah, they are. And you mentioned women's lacrosse, still trying to be able to get that first win, 18-1 against Chatham before that, too. I'm going to put a bold prediction out there and think that they will get a victory this season. I'm not sure which game it's going to be, but I think the lacrosse team is going to capture a victory, one of their first victories since February 23rd of 2020. And you mentioned the golf teams as well, and also with tennis and just a lot of these other teams that are starting to get some more positive contributions as well.
For the women's golf team, they participated in the St. Vincent Invitational on Saturday. They placed 4th out of 4 teams. But the men's team had a dual match against Carlow University, and the winner, the individuals, Luke Deal, scored a low of 82 in the dual match, and also Carter Newcomb, amongst others, went into that as well. Some pretty good individual performances for the men's golf team. But when we come back here on Jacket Sports Weekly, Jesse Kane is going to break down the Waynesburg University baseball team. You're watching Jacket Sports Weekly.
Welcome back to Jacket Sports Weekly. The baseball team is in the midst of a slide currently, 5-13 overall and 1-5 in PAC play, including getting swept on Saturday at home at the hands of Grove City. And here to break down how the baseball team fared is our baseball expert, Jesse Kane. Jesse, great to have you here.
Thank you.
You called the second game. I called the first game. First game being a 4-3 loss for the Yellow Jackets, and the second one a lot more lopsided. 21-3. What did you see in the second game that really for Waynesburg spiraled quickly?
Well, I mean, if the other team puts up 21 runs, it's got to be pitching. I mean, they stay consistent with 3 runs themselves batting. But 21 runs, it's got to be pitching. They went through 5 pitchers. Waynesburg played 5 pitchers. All of them just didn't play long. I mean, Aiden Williams played an inning and 2 outs, and then he got pulled. He let up 5-6 earned runs himself, and by the end of the second, it was 9-0. So Waynesburg just was definitely in a struggle to start that game. I mean, they did end up putting some runs on the board later on throughout the game, but the best pitcher from that game was Nevin Kostelak, who finished out with 2 scoreless innings and a strikeout of his own. So Nevin, a lot of improvement for himself, and I mean, he pitched good 2 innings, but for the rest of the team, they got to get their pitching figured out.
Now, let's keep in mind, Grove City is a decent team. I think, they're one of the top teams in the PAC. But let's take a look at that first game, that 4-3 loss. It was tied 3-3, but in the top of the 7th inning, a single drove in a run for the Grove City Wolverines to take that 4-3 lead and eventually win the game. But Joe Sablak had a solid afternoon. He did allow 10 hits, but he at least kept the game close. How important was his impact on Saturday?
Oh, definitely. Joe Sablak always produces good on the mound, I believe, and he's one of their best pitchers, if not the best for sure. And it gets to that point in a close game where, I mean, it might be better to bring in the reliever, like Corey came in for the final out of the game. You never know if you should have brought Corey in sooner or not. And, I mean, Waynesburg had a chance to put another run on the board at the next inning anyway. So it all just goes back to the analytics and stats at the end of the game. But that definitely, obviously, was a whole lot closer. And I really enjoyed watching that game and the end of it. And I was hoping the next game, the final game of the doubleheader, would be a lot closer. But sadly, we didn't get that result.
So Perry Cunningham's first season as the head coach after having 14 years as an assistant coach, and also banking on some freshmen, including Aiden Williams, Bryce Badillion, just to name 2 of them. Do you think that part of the reason why this team is struggling is because of the youth that they're playing?
Well, in college athletics, you're always going to have that youth, especially with the coaching changes. And Waynesburg definitely has a really young roster. So I think that could be a reason for it. And it all depends in the future years whether those players getting the experience now are going to turn out and, really advance and just advance their performance in the future. So I think that can be a reason why, but I think that this experience they're gaining right now currently could propel them to be top contenders in the next couple years as well. And they've definitely got talent, especially in the youth, and even with the upperclassmen they have this year. It's just about putting the full performance together in the field at a time.
And speaking of youth, the top 4 batters in the lineup in the first game were all freshmen. So that just gives you an idea of how young this team is. But with youth and inexperience comes errors. So how did the errors play a factor in those games? Because there was a couple times where the errors cost the Yellow Jackets some runs.
Yeah, so that first game, Tyler Woodrow, upperclassman, went 3 for 3 and an RBI. Todd Berner, upperclassman transfer, he went 2 for 3, 2 RBIs and 1 run. And then Mike Bell, 1 for 3. So even though they did have those underclassmen at the beginning of the batting order, we still saw the upperclassmen overperform compared to them. So it's all about that experience I was just talking about, and I think that is how you get them in there to those game situations, and especially that first game, a really close game, and having those underclassmen, just the opportunity to be clutch and to score runs definitely is good for the Yellow Jackets.
Jesse, something else that really stands out to me is this team is 1-4 at home. What do you think the reason is behind that? Do you think that it's just the quality of opponents that the Yellow Jackets have played so far, that they've not been able to find that home cooking that usually you're able to have and to be able to find success at home and then try to translate it on the road?
Yeah, I'm going to go with that answer. The new turf, that's obviously a conspiracy, I'll call it, that, they haven't gotten used to the field. I don't believe that at all. And also the home games, I've been to most of them. There's been a lot of fans attending as well. So I definitely just think it's the quality of the team and their opponents they're facing. But, there is that whole thing about the change of turf, and softball team's doing really well. So I don't think that's quite to blame for their performance at home. I think it's just the opponents, and I think they'll get it going later in the season.
Jesse, really appreciate you joining us. But when we come back, Jeremiah Miller will be here to break down the softball team and their success so far this year. So stay tuned here on Jacket Sports Weekly.
Welcome back to Jacket Sports Weekly on WCTV. Now we're going to break down the softball team doing extremely well here for Waynesburg University. Here to talk all about it is our good friend Jeremiah Miller. Thanks for joining us at the desk today. 13-4 overall for the softball team. Started off 2-0 in conference play with a doubleheader win against Teal College on Sunday. Break it all down for us, Jeremiah.
Yeah, already 13-4 as you mentioned. Already one more win than they had all of last year. 2 big wins to start conference play up against Teal College. Dominant fashion, only 1 run given up on the whole day from both pitchers, Ella Brookman and Sydney Wilson. Sydney Wilson 7 innings in game 1. Ella Brookman only had to go 5 innings, 1 earned run, only gave up 3 hits in game 2 on Sunday.
And Wilson now second in the nation in overall ERA at .41. What do you have to say just about the impact that she's had on this team this year on the mound?
Yeah, what an impact. And an impact I don't think anyone saw coming, even those on this campus. A freshman from Clay Battelle, West Virginia. Not a big powerhouse in the state of West Virginia, but really showing up here at the NCAA collegiate level, really going off. Really started in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Now she brings it back up north to Pennsylvania, and she just keeps on rolling.
So would you say that extended time off that the softball team had, it looked like it worked out well for them. What do you think?
Yeah, I was a little anxious to see what would go on. Obviously, they had a couple of series, one against Mount Aloysius, and I believe the other was Penn State Fayette. got postponed, so we'll see what happens there. But yeah, big win. The first game, 11-0 win over Teal. And didn't expect the bats to be that warmed up, especially about a week and a half off. So it was good to see that. A lot of triples in that first game. I believe 5 triples from 5 different players in that first game. So they showed the bats were still fine and still corked up and ready to go.
Yeah, you alluded to it. You're still going to be able to have run support, and we saw that with Keanu Bagnell, Brent Hunter, Reagan Benschoter. Do you think that the length in this lineup just continues to improve as they see more at-bats and being able to have the solid pitching that they have to be able to really attack more balls that they might face that maybe they may not swing at and work at counts?
Well, yeah, I mean, you bring it up. I mean, Sydney Wilson's second ERA in all of Division III, so you only really need to give her 1 run of space to really work with. But yeah, and the thing is with this team, it's someone else every game. It's not the same. Like Ella Brookman does have a solid back, and so does Brent Hunter. We'll talk about her, I'm sure, later. But there's 1 through 9 is contributing each game, and it's someone different out of those 9 each game. And that's huge for this team if they want to make a run to a conference championship.
And what are some of the key factors in order to keep this pitching rotation in full strength? Because, I mean, it's very, very strong, no doubt about it, but they only go with about 2 or 3 in that main rotation. How is that going to play a factor, especially later on in the season?
Truthfully, that's all you really need for softballs. Honestly, just 1. It's something to see Waynesburg have 2 like they do. Biggest thing's just got to stay healthy. I mean, that's all there really is to it. Keep them healthy, and that production will stay there. You just got to keep the bats going, really, for Waynesburg.
So Chatham's coming up next for this softball team that, as Caleb has alluded to, has been the best of the best that we've seen out of the spring sports here at Waynesburg. What do you expect? You expect that this will continue on this path for the Yellow Jacket softball team to be able to continue having this success despite having some freshmen that are some of the main contributors?
Yeah, they have a doubleheader against Chatham this week, and then they travel on Saturday to Grove City. That'll be a big test. There's no reason they shouldn't go 3 out of 4 with wins this coming week. Realistically, you'd like to see them win all 4, but 3 out of 4, not only do I think they will, but they need to. They split with Grove City down in Myrtle. I think they need to at least split with Grove City coming up, and I think they take care of the Cougars here on Thursday.
And a real quick question to kind of wrap things up. A lot of positives. Do you see any negatives or things to at least work on for the Yellow Jackets?
Not yet. No, looking good. It's hard to say they have when they've won 8 of their last 9.
No, absolutely. And when we come back here on Jacket Sports Weekly, we're going to break down the outdoor track and field teams with Meg Berry, so don't go anywhere.
Welcome back to Jacket Sports Weekly. The men's and women's outdoor track and field teams competed at the Dave Labor Invitational at Slippery Rock this past weekend. And here to break down the performances from the 2 teams is Megan Berry. Megan, you were there, of course, as a part of the track team. How did the event go?
It went really well. It was the first meet we had this year with good weather, thankfully. We definitely needed that. And we had 36 personal best this past meet. So that within itself is just an amazing accomplishment to be the 3rd meet of the year, and we're still progressing and none of our athletes are really truly peaking yet.
And one athlete that wasn't necessarily there on Saturday at Slippery Rock, but also competed for Waynesburg in a sense, was Aubrey Winger. Can you just talk about the impact that she's had in another state, essentially?
Yeah, so Aubrey actually is a marine biology major here at Waynesburg, so she does the 3-in-1 plan. So that is why she's at Coastal Carolina and competing in South Carolina. She competed at High Point University this week, and heading into the 10,000 meter run, she was 5th in the nation. Unfortunately, this past week she dropped to about 19th, but that's still amazing to be top 25 as a D3 athlete in an event like that. She is currently 3rd in the NCAA for D3 colleges, which is amazing. And being the fact that she's competing on her own and doesn't truly have her team there to like support her, and she's still doing as well as she is, it's just a huge accomplishment for her.
So for the team that did compete, with Michaela Rose having 2 top 8 performances, as well as Rachel Pellegrino having the team best for the women's 800 meter, how do you think that overall for Waynesbury that competed at the event at Slippery Rock, everything just gone for the team? And do you think there's any positive momentum, of course, with all the best for the team, that can continue to ride this on for the rest of the season?
This definitely is a positive for us. With 15 season bests in the women's side, that is just an amazing accomplishment at this point in the season. It's definitely positive impact that's just going to continue to push us to want to do better. And the women's team goal this year is to win PAC championships. So if we're doing this well against these PAC schools, because there were a couple PAC schools that were at the meet this weekend, if we can do this well now, imagine how much better we can do 3 weeks from now when PAX is around the corner.
Now, you mentioned that the women's team had a lot of personal records, but also for the men's team had a lot of personal records as well. Can you talk about some of the key performers on Saturday for them?
Yeah, so the men had 19 season bests this past weekend, and one person that truly sticks out is Kai Herbert. He got 8th place in the 110-meter hurdles, which competing against all these D2 schools is amazing. He is currently ranked relatively high in the pack right now, and just to have that accomplishment of 8th place and every single person in front of him was an athlete who went to a D2 school. So having that accomplishment is just great, and I think it'll definitely motivate him to do better. And this past weekend, we had our first hammer thrower compete in the meet, and that was Aiden Sheely. He didn't do as best as he wanted to, but just to get to that step of having our teammates and teams compete in different events and to have the opportunity to get more points is just an amazing accomplishment.
Now, one thing that's really important whenever you're running outside and you're with the conditions is the weather. How were the weather conditions play at Slippery Rock, and was it more favorable than past events?
This was definitely the best meet this year when it comes to weather. When we were at WVU, the rain was definitely a downfall, and so was the wind. And then at Bethany last weekend, it snowed the entire meet. So having at least 50-degree weather with the sun out all day and very little wind was super nice. Yes, it was still a bit chilly, but I think the good weather was a true aspect to why so many people on this team did great this past weekend.
And just a final quick question to wrap up. What are some of the key factors going into the next meet for you guys?
Some of the key factors is to take these high points from this past meet and to continue to build on them, and to not just try to mellow out and save our best performances for PAX, but to continue to build and to continue to do better leading into PAX.
Well, Megan, really appreciate you joining us and breaking down the track and field teams. So, when we return after the break, Tanner Saprosky will be sitting down with Corey Fischer of the baseball team here on Jacket Sports Weekly.
Back on Jacket Sports Weekly, I'm Terrence Saprosky, and today I'm joined by Waynesburg University baseball player and close friend Corey Fischer. Corey, thanks for being on the show this week.
Thanks for having me, Tanner.
And obviously at this point, a lot of people probably know your story about everything you've been going through so far this year. So just give a quick rundown on how your diagnosis went, how you kind of discovered it, and what your schedule's been like so far.
Yeah, so in the summertime I started to have like a weird, every once in a while I'd wake up and just kind of not be able to, not walk, but I'd walk with like a limp, and I just felt an irritation like my groin, and then it would go away for a month and kind of never thought anything of it for that reason. And then when we got back to school, like September, October, it started to be really consistent to the point that I could barely walk and I couldn't sleep at all. You live with me, so you remember quite a few occurrences of that. I got to the point in October that I couldn't really drive. I literally didn't sleep for probably 2 months. So after going to the trainer for a while, we thought it was maybe a labrum issue, maybe a pulled groin, something from pitching, and went finally do an x-ray from UPMC, and it showed a little shadow on my bone. And then I went and got an MRI, and it showed a 13 centimeter mass in my soft tissue and in my pelvis of my right side of my pelvis into my groin area. And so originally I thought it was lymphoma, and then it ended up being diagnosed as Ewing sarcoma, which is a rare form of bone cancer, bone and soft tissue cancer. And so ever since end of November, early December, I received my first chemo treatment. So I go in for 5 days of inpatient chemo. So it's 5 days straight of chemo. I stay at Children's Hospital, go home for a week, get my blood the next Tuesday, and the following Tuesday after that, I go in the hospital for 2 days, and then that's my cycle. So 5 days off for a week, 2 days off for a week. And then recently, about a month ago, 2 weeks ago, I started radiation. So I have radiation 5 days a week, and then I'm still continuing my chemo treatments on top of that.
So obviously it's a very busy schedule, as you just mentioned, all the days and driving back and forth and stuff like that. So how have you been able to, because you're still in school, how have you been able to balance everything that you're going through at the hospital and driving back and forth with your schoolwork that you're still doing here?
Yeah, the teachers at Waynesbury are really awesome, so I have to thank them for that. They've been very gracious with me, which is my family and I really appreciate that, because I have one semester left, so I just wanted to graduate. So I've just been able to manage it. A lot of makeup work, a lot of kind of doing things on my own, not my own time necessarily, but not necessarily having it as structured, because I can't really show up to classes in the morning because I drive an hour and a half, get to Children's at 8:30 every single morning, and then get radiation for about 30 minutes, and then drive an hour home, so I don't get back here until like 10:30 every morning. And on top of that, with baseball, thankfully they've all been really gracious, and I've been able to kind of keep up with it so far. So the plan is to graduate in May, and that's going well so far.
And you mentioned that you still go back and forth, and you're still a very active member of the baseball team. So where do you find your motivation to be able to handle what you're going through while still being able to participate with the baseball team?
I think, as anybody who's probably been diagnosed with cancer, the one thing you want to do is try as much as possible to kind of try to keep things normal, even though you're kind of diagnosed with a situation that is not normal, especially somebody my age. And so I think that I find the motivation just in the fact that baseball I've played since I was 5 years old, so it's kind of always been my escape, if you will, of escape from anything going on in reality. So this is kind of the biggest testament to that now. Probably my last season, other than playing in the summer, but my biggest season as a senior here. So kind of been built up for this. So it obviously stinks that this wrench has been thrown into it, but it's always been my escape. So it's kind of the biggest testament this year being that it's my escape from one of the biggest hardships of my life for sure.
And you've had some pretty cool opportunities to be on FaceTime with a couple of famous Pittsburgh athletes like Sidney Crosby, Jason Zucker, and TJ Watt, and that led into the whole thing with your Super Bowl trip. So how was that trip to LA, and how did you enjoy the Super Bowl?
No, that was awesome. Yeah, so that came as a complete surprise. I was able to go out there with my dad, so that was a blast. And going to the Super Bowl is kind of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It just so happened that it worked out that it was in Los Angeles, which I'd never been there before. So wish the Steelers would have been there, but it was an amazing opportunity. Going out there for 3 days we saw a UCLA USC basketball game, which was awesome, and then the Super Bowl the next day. It was amazing. So I've definitely never experienced anything like it. So I very appreciated Children's Hospital and the Steelers for that too.
And there's been a lot of stories. You've been interviewed many times by some local news outlets. If there is anything, what's something that maybe you didn't say in those interviews that now that you have the opportunity to say it here, is there anything that you didn't say then that you would want to say now?
I think it's just the fact that of all the support that everybody shows and gets, not only just my family, my girlfriend, her family, my friends, the baseball team, coaches, all that. It's just the fact that you're at Children's Hospital, and it's kind of rough. The hardest thing I always tell people is the biggest delay I have on my admission days on Tuesdays is because I have to wait for a bed to be available, and that's something that kind of changes your perspective on life, is the fact that I have to wait 3 hours in a room with my mom because there's too many kids that are filling a cancer floor, which is kind of one of the worst things. You have to come to reality, and then you see all the kids walking around. So I think it's just, I get blessed with the opportunities that it landed me because I think I'm a little bit older. I could do all those news stories, so I could do the interviews. They didn't have to interview parents, they had to interview me about the Super Bowl, so I kind of got picked that way. and that was really cool. But there's a lot of kids that go through a lot of stuff, so I think that all the foundations and all that stuff, it definitely doesn't. You wonder when you hear about cancer research and where that money goes. There's a lot of stuff that people do for the whole entire floor of the Children's Hospital. That whatever you can do is helping kids, which is pretty awesome.
We'll switch gears now to more of a baseball focus. First, the preseason trip down to Florida. I had the honor of going down with the team, as most people know by now. But how do you think your body physically handled that trip to Florida? Because of all the travel, you took the plane, not the bus down, but still had 6 games in 7 days going back and forth on the buses. So how do you think you handled that in Florida this season?
Yeah, I think that the timing for Florida actually worked out perfectly because so they do my initial 6 rounds of chemotherapy. They give you like a little break after them because they do rescans to make sure everything's kind of going in the right direction. So it landed perfectly then. And so like you said, I took the plane, which thanks to our manager, Perry, and his wife, who's been amazing throughout this whole process. They were like, you should lay on the bus for however long that was, 18 hours, and let your body handle that. So I think that was definitely beneficial for me. But yeah, I think my body handled Florida well. I think when I got home, it was more of a reality check kind of. That Teal game 2 weeks ago, I finished 5 days of chemo and pitched 2 days later, and I think my body was kind of, and radiation on top of it, definitely has its negative. It definitely has its side effects. You get tired, you get bone pain, joint pain, stuff like that. But as for the Florida trip, I thought it went a lot better than it was planned. So, I was happy with the way I felt. I was happy with the way I pitched, and I was glad we got some wins down there too.
I was going to say, you pitched very well in Florida, that one start versus Concordia and the save at the end of the trip. You've also pitched extremely well back here in Pennsylvania. So why do you think you've been so successful on the mound this season?
I think that we have a really good defense behind me, which is nice. I think that senior Tyler Woodrow, another one of our roommates, catcher, me and him are we're on a very same page with how we like to approach different batters and approach the defensive side of baseball, which that's part of the battle, as you know, is kind of the mental aspect of how to pitch and how to pitch to batters. And I think him and I have a really good relationship out there, so that definitely helps. And so far, I've just been changing speeds and hitting my spots, and my stuff's moving as for now, and I keep getting people out. So I'm rolling with it for now, and hopefully we can continue it and make a little run here towards the end of the season.
And it is a very young team, a lot of freshmen, a lot of sophomore guys that are involved. Maybe not the best start to the season so far, but there's still a lot of games left to be played. But where do you see this team in the future, say 2, 3, even 4 years from now?
Yeah, I think that this is probably the best skilled-wise team, with the exception, we were talking about the other day, the COVID year we lost my sophomore year was a very good team too, but this is probably the best talented team that I've had. I mean, obviously when you don't have Mason Miller, that's tough to really come back from, but there's a lot of really young talent that we have, these freshmen, and I think that earlier in the season, we played, as you saw, we played some really good opponents in Florida, and then this conference is one of the best conferences in the region, so I mean, kind of well-rounded conference. You're going to see a lot of good pitchers, a lot of good hitters, and I think that from a pitching perspective at least, the thing I tell the young guys is it's not high school anymore where you can miss your spots, and so I think that is one adjustment you kind of have to make, which I went through it. Joe, our other good pitcher, went through it. He was younger too. It's just you learn kind of the hard way, if you will, and I think that as these guys get more experience now when they're young, I think that going forward, especially with Perry as a manager who's leading us in the right direction, I think that 2-3 years from now with this group of guys and whoever else he recruits, the sky's the limit for them. And I think that this year we could go also very far if we get things moving in the right direction because the talent's definitely there.
And last question real quick before we wrap up. You are a senior, you'll be graduating in May. What are you going to miss most about this team, and what do you personally want to leave behind for the team when you're gone?
What I want to miss most is just competing every day. I mean, even I've never complained about going to practice, if you will. I mean, sure, that's not a true statement, but mainly I never really complained about going to a practice in my life. I love baseball, and I think that anytime you get to compete at this level, which is one of the highest levels you can compete in, I think that just the camaraderie and being able to go out there every single day and just compete one-on-one battles on the mound is really something special, and I love that aspect of baseball. And one thing I'd love to leave behind is just that every time I go out there, I don't throw the hardest, I don't have the best stuff in the world, but every time I go out there, I give it my all, and I think that's something that at this level is kind of the biggest factor for guys to be successful, especially pitching, is when you get out there, just give it everything you have, and that's something that I want to leave behind with my legacy. This year, with everything I'm going through and the years past, just I gave it all every time I go out there, and nobody can say otherwise.
Well, again, thank you for joining us this week on Jacket Sports Weekly. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have. Everybody here on campus and around is always, of course, proud of you, of how you've been handling your situation so far. But that's all the time we have today. Come back in 2 weeks for our next episode of Jacket Sports Weekly right here on WCTV.
This has been a production of Waynesburg Community Television.